What is up, my fellow andronauts? Let's talk about anhedonia, what causes anhedonia, and specifically in the case of this video, this gut bacteria that can contribute to anhedonia. So I'm going to discuss what exactly contributes to anhedonia and then what the gut has to do with it, right? So you might have heard that the gut is also called the second brain. And obviously that means that the gut significantly influences your mood, everything about cognition, right? It can contribute to brain fog, anxiety, depression, sleeping disorders, mental conditions, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diseases, right? So the gut influences every aspect of the body, especially the brain, right? So every time someone has some form of a mental condition and their diet's maybe on point, I would like to know what's going on with the gut. And everyone has their own theory as to what contributes to anhedonia, and I will discuss what that is. But with all of this theory apart, what can you do about it? Like, let's say you say that it is a that it is desensitization of the serotonin receptors, right? How do you test that? You can't test that. You have no lighthouse, you have no beacon that you can lock onto to see if you're actually making progress and if you're doing the right thing. So I like to find markers that can indicate what's wrong. So for example, if you have depression and you see that you have a zinc deficiency, you know the zinc deficiency is contributing to depression. So with anhedonia, if you have gut issues, like, yeah, the gut influences the brain, so let's fix this, and then you will see how significantly better you're going to feel because you have this beacon that you can lock onto. This is clearly wrong with me. For example, this gut is wrong. And I know the gut influences the brain, so let's fix this, right? And then see how I improve. So let me show you the correlations with the microbiome and how it directly influences anhedonia, basically. Before we dive into the video, if you haven't already, be sure to get my ebook on how to maximize your testosterone naturally. If you would like me to help maximize your testosterone, links are in the description below. Let's dive in. All right, so what contributes to anhedonia? There's many things, but here are some of the highlights. It's a dysfunction of the sympathetic nervous system, basically low dopamine and or norepinephrine. It's a dysfunction of the glutamate system, the serotonin system, the oxytocin system, and the opioid system. There's obviously a lot more systems, and the reason why I say it's a dysregulation of the system, it's not just high or low, is because let's take, for example, serotonin. There is 14 known receptors. Some of them become hyposensitive, hypersensitive, right? So it's more a dysregulation of the serotonin system in different areas of the brain. So serotonin and glutamate and dopamine and so on is not just found in the brain, it's also found everywhere else in the body, right? And so also anhedonia could be that you have too much serotonin in one area of the brain and too little in another area of the brain. So it's not like high-low. This is why I'm saying it's a dysfunction, which makes everything a little bit more complicated. But instead of making things complicated, I really want to focus on the sympathetic nervous system, specifically in this case, dopamine and noradrenaline, and I'm going to slightly touch on serotonin as well, and the specific bacteria that can contribute to it. Let's dive in. Right, so gut problem can cause low dopamine and noradrenaline. So I specifically want to point out here, we have this Clostridia bacteria. So this test result, as you can see, is from an organic acid test. This one was from, I think, Genova, right? So they look at the urinary markers, and this bacteria, as you can see, produces various bacterial markers. So you have C. difficile, you might know about, and then this specific marker was elevated with this guy, right? It was very high. And so you have clearly an overgrowth of this Clostridia group. So the Clostridia is a family, and in that family you have different members. And some of those members produces different toxins, as you can see. Like all of these members can produce different kinds of toxins. And in high amounts causes problems. Here's why. So these two metabolites for cresol, so he didn't have high levels of this one, but he had elevated levels of this marker. So what happens is you have phenylalanine, for example, and you have this Clostridia bacteria that uses phenylalanine to create this metabolite that then inhibits dopamine beta hydroxylase. So dopamine beta hydroxylase converts dopamine into norepinephrine. So what happens is that now you end up with high dopamine, low norepinephrine. And we know that norepinephrine is involved in antidepressant benefits, sensitivity, mood, motivation, drive, libido, like all of the good stuff that we want. We often associate that with dopamine, but very often, let's say, when you use antidepressant, the more modern ones is a serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. So it boosts both serotonin and norepinephrine because they understand the benefits, the mental benefits of norepinephrine. So if you have an overgrowth of this bacteria, it's going to inhibit the conversion of dopamine to norepinephrine. And then when you look at your neurotransmitters, it looks like this. So this is the metabolite of dopamine, very high, at least in this guy. Then you have the metabolite of norepinephrine and epinephrine, very low. So then you have a very high ratio between dopamine and norepinephrine. And this means that you start to lack motivation and drive and sensitivity and libido. And now you feel like, I don't feel good. So now you start using dopaminergic compounds and like tyrosine, phenylalanine, and you're going to make the problem worse because if you could see, this bacteria uses phenylalanine to inhibit this enzyme, right? So now you take these precursors, even tyrosine can be used to inhibit it. So now you take those precursors and make you feel even worse. It's like, well, I need more dopamine, but it's going to make it worse, right? Because you have that overgrowth of the bacteria that's causing these issues. And then in this case, you can see his serotonin wasn't actually this high and a few other metabolites. Anyway, so the whole point is when you have an overgrowth of this Clostridia group, right, it can cause a lot of issues with anhedonia. So you can do a stool test, for example, gut zoomer, and we'll look at these metabolites, at the whole family of Clostridia. And we'll see if you have an overgrowth of Clostridia bacteria and if it might contribute to your issues. And then you can also do an organic acid test to see if you have the urinary markers for these bacteria. That will also look at your neurotransmitters, right? But you can also do a neurotransmitter-only test because the organic acid test will look at the gut issues, nutritional deficiencies, and also neurotransmitters, oxidative stress, and so on. But you can do only a neurotransmitter test, which will be a little bit cheaper. But I would say just do the organic acid test, right? And then we look at your neurotransmitters to see exactly what's going on. All right, then I want to show you about Clostridia and serotonin. So the Clostridia bacteria can produce up to 50% of gut serotonin. They are one of the main species that produce serotonin. And we know that too much serotonin can also contribute to anhedonia. So now you have an overgrowth of this bacteria that's inhibiting the production of norepinephrine and is also producing serotonin that's really putting you in a very negative balance, serotonin dominant, low catecholamines, right? Creating anhedonia. And also, specifically in this family of Clostridium, you have this Syndense leptin that displays 7-alpha dehydroxylation activity, which is required for the production of deoxycholate, which is a secondary bile acid. So this deoxycholate is created from another bile acid. From a primary bile acid, it creates a secondary bile acid. And this bile acid has been shown to increase colonic serotonin levels and tryptophan hydroxylase expression. So tryptophan hydroxylase is the enzyme the rate-limited enzyme that creates serotonin. So not only does the bacteria in itself produce serotonin, but it also creates a secondary bile acid that then stimulates additional colonic production of more serotonin. So it really puts you in a serotonin dominant state while inhibiting the production of norepinephrine. All right, so now let's switch over to some of the good bacteria, right? So you have this pathogenic bacteria that's often overgrown, and then you have the main antagonistic bacteria to Clostridium is Enterococcus. So Enterococcus is the main antagonistic bacteria to Clostridium, and you will often see they go in a seesaw way. So when they should be in balance, but when Enterococcus drops, the Clostridium will go up. And so when you supplement Enterococcus as a probiotic, for example, you can actually shift this ratio. So when your gut health improves, you also shift this ratio, and you start to optimize your health. So I want to also point out that Enterococcus helps to increase the production of dopamine. So this was a study that I found about berberine, and in the gut you have this enzyme called nitroreductase. So nitroreductase adds hydrogen groups to berberine, creating dihydroberberine. And so what happens is that dihydroberberine donates its hydrogens for the recycling of BH4. BH4 is the cofactor for tyrosine hydroxylates that converts tyrosine into L-DOPA, right? So berberine has also been shown to enhance the levels of this Enterococcus species, and then it also creates dihydroberberine, which feeds for the production of more dopamine. So in my previous video, how I talked about how to increase your dopamine levels permanently, I talk about how you can use berberine to increase this Enterococcus species, but you can also use dihydroberberine, or another one is to use Cura White. So Cura White is the dihydrocurcuminoids. So curcuminoids also has a lot of hydrogen groups attached. Instead of dihydroberberine, so berberine with dihydro is 2 hydrogen groups. You get this curcuminoids with dihydro, tetrahydro, hexahydro, octahydro. It's like 8 hydrogen groups attached to this curcuminoid, right? So now you absorb this curcuminoid with 8 hydrogens, so it's very effective at boosting BH4 for increasing dopamine. So you can literally combine berberine with curoate or berberine with dihydroberberine, and this will be really good for increasing enterococcus and also dopamine levels for anhedonia. Now, the way you can increase enterococcus, as I mentioned, is by using apple and grape polyphenols. You can just eat it, or you can supplement it. But so it's not that you need the fiber, it's the polyphenols. So what that means is you can also drink the juice, because the polyphenols is found in the juice as well. So you don't need the fibers, right? So you can still benefit from juice if you have gut issues. Because a lot of people benefit from going on a lower residue diet when they have gut issues, right? So apple and grape polyphenols help to increase enterococcus, berberine and ginseng. So this is the main ones that I could find that can help to increase enterococcus. You also get probiotics to supplement that will help, like enterococcus probiotics that will help balance the microbiome and increase overall enterococcus levels in the body. So there you have it. The gut can massively influence how you feel and specifically contribute to anhedonia, and some of the main ones that's involved is this Clostridium family and enterococcus, which work in an opposite way. So if you do a stool test, you will very often see that your Clostridium is really high and your enterococcus is very low. Right, so just by improving gut health, you can help to shift that ratio. And a great way to do that is start with berberine and apple and grape polyphenols and maybe some ginseng, and that will help to increase enterococcus. And then you can use other compounds like Lactobacilli rhamnosus, black raspberry, chokeberry, and the Bifidobacterium breve has been shown to reduce Clostridium levels. All right, so there you go. If you want to see if this is the issue for you, do an organic acid test, either from Genova or Mosaic DX, and then do a stool test. I would prefer to do a gut zoomer test, which is going to be the most comprehensive, or you can also do a biome site that will look at some of the Clostridium and enterococcus markers, but it's not going to be as intensive as a gut zoomer test. Alright guys, I hope this video was insightful, you learned something new and gave you direction to help deal with this anhedonia. If you found this helpful, please share with other people as well. I think they will benefit from this information, and I will check you in the next one. Cheers guys.